Again, I am Kathy Crandall Robinson. I'm the Chief Operations Officer here at the Arms Control Association, where I have the great pleasure of working with our super capable staff team. Our work here depends very much on the strong support of you, our members, our contributors, and our partners. And as we prepare to take on the big challenges that we've been discussing today, we just wanted to note a few ways that you can help. First and foremost, we invite you to join or renew your membership in the Arms Control Association. This includes a subscription to our flagship journal, Arms Control Today, and membership, including a digital subscription to Arms Control Today, is just $25. It's a bargain. Secondly, we ask you to please help your institution subscribe so that your colleagues can receive the latest reporting and analysis from Arms Control Today. Third, we'd like to urge you to give a friend, a colleague, or a student a membership or subscription. It's something that really does make a great holiday gift. We also encourage you to sign up for action alerts on priority issues that are designed to help you reach out to policymakers on key and timely issues. And we also encourage you to meet with your elected officials, and we'll help you in that process. We hope you will also become an arms control ambassador and spread the word, sharing information from ACA with your professional and your social networks. Planned giving is also a really key way to ensure that we can continue our work in the coming generations. Just please contact us if you'd like assistance in making a bequest. So thank you very much for your participation joining us today. And thank you in advance for your support for a more peaceful and secure world. Now we are going to move on to our next plenary session with UN Undersecretary Nakamitsu on disarmament priorities and also longer-term opportunities and challenges.
Well, hello again, everyone. Now we're very pleased that we have the United Nations Undersecretary of State for Disarmament Affairs, Izumi Nakamitsu, with us. She's going to share her perspectives on key priorities and longer-term challenges and opportunities for disarmament, given some of the emerging realities of international peace and security in the current environment. Since 2017, Ms. Nakamitsu has served as the UN Undersecretary General for and High Representative for Disarmament Affairs. And in that role, she's really been at the center of some very difficult and consequential discussions at the United Nations General Assembly, at the UN Security Council on Syrian nuclear weapons issues, among others, the NPT Review Conference, the Conference on Disarmament, the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, and many more issues. And she's really made an impact in her time in this role. And very importantly, in the past year, she was helping us commemorate the solemn anniversaries of the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki and the anniversary of the founding of the UN. So after she speaks, we'll have a time for a few questions from the audience, and you can use your Q&A function for that. And so, Ms. Nakamitsu, thank you so much for being with us. I hope you're well, and we look forward to your remarks. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Daryl, for that very kind introduction. Distinguished panelists, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Obviously, I would like to start with my sincere thanks to Daryl Kimball, Tom Countryman, and the Arms Control Association for enduring expertise and also really advocacy in the pursuit of a world free of nuclear weapons, and indeed for your continued friendship with the United Nations Office for Disarmament Affairs. These are really trying times for those of us seeking to address the dangers posed by nuclear weapons, and they require all of us to support one another in staying focused on the tasks at hand. I also want to congratulate you for, as always, assembling some of the most well-respected minds and critical thinkers in the field of disarmament, non-proliferation, and arms control. I was quietly listening in. The presentations and engagement with audience members have truly run a complex gamut of challenges and opportunities indeed facing us at this singular geostrategic moment. As has been made clear, a confluence of factors that include corrosive relations between nuclear armed states in an increasingly multipolar nuclear order, technological advances with strategic implications, regional security crises with nuclear overtones, and the advent of a costly so-called qualitative arms race have increased nuclear risks to unacceptable levels. At the same time, the nuclear disarmament machinery is paralyzed, as you know, and the arms control regime hangs by a thread. The interlocking and cross-cutting nature of these trends and their potentially catastrophic ramifications have placed us at a juncture at which the only choice for international community is to reverse its current trajectory or face the growing potential for catastrophe. And let me reiterate what I have said so many times before. Arms control and disarmament are not utopian ideals. History shows that they are useful, effective, and indeed indispensable instruments for security. Now, as I said, I was listening in very quietly, and today's conversations and some of the presentations, like the ones by my admired friends and colleagues, Rose Gottemoeller and Tom Countryman, have reinforced to me some vital near-term priorities that can stop the current normative erosion in nuclear disarmament, arms control, and non-proliferation. They have also highlighted many of the longer-term challenges and opportunities for how the international community can build upon the great gains made to date, while seeking to encompass the emerging realities of the international peace and security environment today. For the former, as I see it, stemming the blood flow and returning to the path towards a world free of nuclear weapons requires at least the following near-term actions. First, the New START Treaty should be extended for the full 5 years allowed for in its articles. The ramifications of unconstrained strategic nuclear competition extend beyond the two parties involved. They affect all states, and a 5-year extension will buy time to negotiate further reductions while maintaining a verifiable cap on the most dangerous weapons in existence. The same period should also be used to reflect and explore new approaches to arms control and disarmament, and I will come back to this issue. Second, there is a clear need for urgent measures to reduce the risk of nuclear war. These could include adapting Cold War confidence building mechanisms to the current context, or developing measures to address new challenges, such as declarations not to deploy particularly destabilizing weapons. Risk reduction and confidence building could also extend to enhanced support for efforts to verify nuclear disarmament, or to reduce the dangers of miscalculation posed by new technologies through, for example, politically binding agreements not to target command and control structures. Third, non-proliferation challenges must be resolved through political engagement and diplomatic negotiations. Regional crises, the deteriorating international security climate, technological developments, and military buildups are all exacerbating proliferation drivers. Yet history has taught us that these cannot be resolved through saber rattling or simple shows of force. Instead, they require dialogue and resolve as an integral part of efforts to tackle the root causes and to establish dialogue processes or frameworks and risk reduction and confidence building measures at the regional level. Fourth, a global disarmament and non-proliferation regime should be reinforced and refurbished. The nuclear disarmament machinery has lain fallow for far too long. It needs to get back to work. States possessing nuclear weapons should reaffirm their moratorium on nuclear testing and work with all states to bring the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, CTBT, into force. Divisions, including over the implementation of outstanding commitments, threaten to weaken the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, NPT, the centerpiece of the global regime. As the President-designate has said, states parties should seek to use the time provided by the postponement of the 10th Review Conference to narrow divergences and find a common ground that will strengthen implementation of all three of the NPT's pillars, and in turn, shore up the regime as a whole. And fifth, and following, it should be recognized that the global regime is made up of numerous agreements and instruments, all seeking the same ultimate goal. Secretary General Guterres has stated that the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons will be another pillar in that regime. There are many, often very strong opinions on the TPNW, but its imminent entry into force means that it is a fact, and the intentions of those who have joined it sincerely to reinforce the nuclear disarmament regime should not be questioned. What is needed, in my view, is a modus vivendi between supporters and opponents of the TPNW that will ensure divisions do not impede progress across the broader regime, and I believe it is entirely possible. I believe that addressing these 5 issues will help to blunt the nuclear dangers we currently face, but ensuring the continued viability of efforts to address the risks posed by nuclear weapons are bringing about their eventual elimination and requires longer-term thinking and solutions. Today's world is vastly different to that of even a decade ago when New START Treaty was negotiated. Navigating its increasingly choppy waters to reach safer harbor requires, in my view, some serious new thinking, and this could include the following. First, let me start with the approach of such thinking process, as I believe it is important. Changing times require a more inclusive and diverse approach that takes into account the views of all stakeholders. This includes full and equal participation of women in disarmament processes. Such an approach is not only the right thing to do, but it is a smart thing to do. Peace processes that include women are demonstrably more successful. It also means providing platform for today's youth, as Secretary General Guterres would say, tomorrow's peace builders. They will inherit the current generation's successes and mistakes, and their views should be taken into account. I would actually even say that given the increasingly apparent impact of new and emerging technologies, contributions of young people with fluency in these matters will be absolutely critical. It requires also protecting the valuable role played by civil society organizations like ACA, but also creating new partnerships with interested stakeholders such as industry. Second, we need a fundamental shift in thinking when it comes to military spending, including the exorbitant amounts being spent on nuclear weapons. COVID-19 has clearly demonstrated that security cannot be provided by weapons alone. Humans should be placed front and center, and security should be anchored in approaches that prioritize prevention and mediation. International, national, and human security are not mutually exclusive. In a time of diminishing resources, I hope we can all agree that a global military budget of $1.9 trillion can be better spent in support of pressing goals such as defeating the pandemic. Third, the confluence of factors mentioned above requires what Secretary General has referred to as a new vision for disarmament, arms control, and non-proliferation, one that takes into account the shifting dynamics of the current era. Many quality ideas have already emerged from states, think tanks, and civil society, and it was also very clear during today's conversations. It is important to engage all stakeholders in dialogue that can collect, distill, and build on them. Questions that have emerged that some of us have started to reflect upon, including the following. How can we reduce the dangers posed by the nexus between nuclear weapons and new technologies, and also domains of conflict? How can we progressively include other nuclear armed states in arms control processes? And how can we include all classes of nuclear weapons in such processes? How can we start conversations to address the long overdue issue of missile proliferations? How can we ensure that the safeguard systems and verification measures are fit for purpose in the world of rapid technological change? What might regionally tailored approaches backed by strengthened global norms look like? So all of these suggestions and issues related to disarmament, arms control, and non-proliferation need to be considered in the broader international security context. But then I have been saying for some time that disarmament also needs to be better integrated into broader peace and security endeavors. It is an integral element of efforts to prevent, mitigate, and end conflict after all. Disarmament and other peace building and security initiatives are also complementary and can be pursued in parallel. The 10th NPT Review Conference is an obvious place to gain traction for the implementation of these near-term and longer-term priorities. Due to the NPT's obligations and its near universal membership, the NPT remains de facto negotiating forum for nuclear weapons issues. And the risk of mixing my metaphors, it could help both hold the line against nuclear risks while setting the table for longer-term solutions. But these issues also need to be considered universally and by all relevant parties. With its unique convening power and clear mandate, the United Nations is well placed to act as a platform for multi-stakeholder dialogues on the future of efforts to achieve a world free of nuclear weapons. We, the United Nations, are an international instrument established by member states, and we strive to be an effective instrument in support of their responsibilities to pursue peace and security. So in closing, if COVID-19 has taught us anything, it should be that seemingly low probability events can occur with catastrophic global consequences. The international community has a responsibility to ensure that this does not become the case with nuclear weapons. The norm against the use of nuclear weapons has been maintained for 75 years. to ensure it continues in perpetuity, we must take this opportunity to reverse the current nuclear trajectory and chart the course to a safer and more secure world, a world without nuclear weapons. I thank you very much for your attention, and I'm looking forward to exchanges with you.
Thank you, Ms. Nakamitsu. That was a very comprehensive and thoughtful and powerful agenda for action, which to me is not surprising listening to you over the past few years, and especially thinking about the Secretary General's disarmament agenda that was released a couple of years ago. So thank you very much for outlining the near term and the longer term challenges, and then some approaches to these things. We have a couple questions from the questions and answers column, and I would just encourage everybody listening in, if you have a specific question, to post it in the Q&A, and I will try to pick it up. But we have one question from Hiroki Nakanishi, I think that might be how the name is pronounced, about how nuclear weapon states and non-nuclear weapon states can forge a dialogue on nuclear risk reduction and the intersection of new and emerging and disruptive technologies that can make nuclear stability more difficult. And so where do you think, from your perspective at the UN, and where this dialogue can happen? I mean, you mentioned the Conference on Disarmament. There's the Security Council. The NPT Review Conference is one place, though it has its limitations. I mean, where might a dialogue on these issues, which speak to the challenges in the next 5 to 10 to 15 years, take place in your view?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I actually do think that we need to utilize all these different platforms. I mean, for one thing, we all know that there has been very active discussions, conversations taking place in the context of preparation for the 10th Review Conference of the NPT. We have prioritized, together with UNIDER, issues related to risk reduction and feeding, those, discussions into NPT consultations as well. But also in many other platforms, you have been talking about it, this kind of webinars. There have been also quite a lot of discussions taking place, in various civil society. And I would say that as I was listening into some of the breakout sessions, a number of people mentioned creating environment for nuclear disarmament. I mean, in those, various sessions, the risk reduction measures actually have been one of the issues that both nuclear weapon states and non-nuclear weapon states actually seem to have a common view that it is important. And therefore, I'm very much hopeful that there will be some good agreements and consensus and producing positive outcomes also for the NPT Review Conference as well. So in short and long answer is that let us utilize all available platforms. We are certainly prioritizing at the UN, and we hope that there will be a number of organizations like yours, Daryl, who will be also contributing your really important contributions into those more formal processes.
Well, as you say, the UN system certainly provides the fora, but the states, the horses, have to drink the water. You
Yes.
can lead them there, but they need to take leadership and utilize the instruments and the tools that are available. I wanted to ask another question about one of the issues you just touched upon here, but you've spoken about at greater length, which is the need to address the evolving missile proliferation challenge. And for instance, as you know, the United States just tested a missile interceptor capable of hitting a strategic missile. So if you could just quickly outline, what your framework is for how states can come back to the issue of revitalizing the missile proliferation, missile control system that certainly doesn't seem to be up to snuff at the moment and needs to be revitalized.
Yes, thank you for that. I always say this is very long overdue. At the UN, they were in the past several processes, but it's some time ago. Recently, Germany started a dialogue process, and we have been engaged in that. They had 2 meetings so far. And using that sort of dialogue platforms, and also in the recent first committee meeting of the UN General Assembly, and in the beginning, I made an opening remarks there, and we actually did make this as one of the suggestions to member states. Obviously, it's a very complicated issue. We need to have both. We need to have a good, strong technical conversations. For example, one very concrete suggestions that we have made, and I included that in my first committee speech, is to have a GGE type of a mechanism, group of governmental experts, to really have a technical discussions on looking at the terminology related to missiles. Because we have noticed that, in the context of, for example, DPRK discussions in the Security Council, we've noticed that member states do have different definitions related to missiles. So why not start from a technical conversations whilst in the UN, whilst at the same time there are member states, very useful member states initiatives started, for example, by Germany on missile dialogues also taking place in parallel. Again, it's not that we can have just one process. It will have to be discussed from various angles, from within various different platforms. Where we thought we could add value at the UN was to start with the technical conversations. So this is obviously something that is really related to, and I would even say a critical part of a new vision discussions if we are to start such conversations, of course, after the NPT review conference. So the more preparations, technical preparations we could do now, the better, so that states can engage in in-depth conversations when they are ready to do so.
Let me just note that there was one question about which new technologies are we speaking about that can affect nuclear stability. That's a good question. The answer to that, I think, is best answered by a new article that's in the recent issue of the new issue of Arms Control Today by Michael Clare, who talks very eloquently about the disruptive technologies that can undermine the concept of strategic stability. So let me move on to another question, maybe a final question, and this is simple, but it's difficult, but I think you can deal with this. You were talking about the differences between nuclear weapon states and non-nuclear weapon states on the Non-Proliferation Treaty, some of the frustration about the lack of progress on disarmament. From your perch at the UN, I mean, do you see a basis for common ground on action towards the common goal of a world without nuclear weapons? I mean, you mentioned New START in particular. That's kind of a basic one, but is there common ground, especially as we move into the discussions at the NPT review conference?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I mentioned, we talked about risk reduction, but I think, there are some really practical things that nuclear weapons can do, which will, I'm actually copying Tom Countryman from his breakout session just earlier, which would not disturb, the current strategic balance. and would not change much, but it will actually create a tremendous positive impact in order for nuclear weapon states and non-nuclear weapon states to come together and find, return to a common vision towards a nuclear weapon-free world. Some of them are, declaratory actions. Some of them are, backed by the actual return to negotiations. And of course, new START to be extended. I think that's a big step, which I think is probably most critical. And all of those actually adds up to the obligation under the NPT Article 6. The more sort of actions demonstrated by nuclear weapon states that they are sincere in returning to, Article 6 obligations, and they want to implement this, the more incentives for non-nuclear weapon states, particularly those that are, within the framework of the TPNW, to return to the common vision. So as I said many times, I think it is entirely possible. There are, many efforts, many great efforts that are done also by countries that belong to both sides. Some of them coming from nuclear weapon states, some of them those in alliance with nuclear weapon states, and some coming from TPNW. I think now is the time before August next year to bring those efforts together and then find exactly how to achieve a common ground so that we will be able to have a successful conclusion of the NPT review conference. And that will set the scene, I think, for a potential a new vision exercise, if you will. It is also absolutely true that so much has changed in the world. We actually really need to figure out what might be a new vision going forward. And for me, I think NPT having a reasonable success will be a critical first step for that exercise.
Well, thank you. Well, I agree. That would be a quote unquote successful NPT is an important start. And, our assessment is that the new Biden administration is going to try to make it a success. And but there's a lot of work to be done between now and August, especially given the challenges of simply engaging, diplomats engaging with one another ahead of the meeting, given the restrictions of the pandemic. And we wish Ambassador Zlavinen and his colleagues the best of luck trying to pull this off, and you and your team at the UN making sure that the facility and the people working there are safe. So I want to thank you once again for your insights. We always find inspiration from our colleagues at the UN who have a unique perspective on these issues, a global perspective that's always important for those of us who work primarily here in the United States. So thank you very much, Ms. Nakamitsu. We look forward to seeing you virtually and in person again. And now we're going to move on to our next portion of our meeting and our closing session. And I want to just, before I hand the virtual microphone back to our board chairman, Tom Countryman, to introduce our final speaker and then close out our annual meeting, I want to just say to everyone, thanks for engaging in this virtual conference experiment with us together. It has been a challenge on our end, and we appreciate your patience and your interest. And I just wanted to note that we've tried to answer quickly as many of the questions that were put up in the Q&A box as possible. We haven't been able to get to all of them. This meeting has also focused on the nuclear weapons problem primarily, but our organization works on more issues than just nuclear weapons. We are the host and an active partner in the Chemical Weapons Coalition. We also do work on conventional arms control and landmines and weapons that have a particularly harmful impact on civilians. And there's more information on our website about those issues. And of course, there's more information and news and analysis in every issue of our monthly journal, Arms Control Today. So I would encourage you, if you got interest in those issues or you've got questions that were not answered today, to take a look at our website and the resources there, where you can, there's just a wealth of information that's put together by our contributors and our great staff. So I want to turn the microphone over, as I said, to Tom Countryman, our board chair, who's going to introduce our final speaker and then take us out this afternoon. Thanks, Tom.